Hi, hello again, friends. Just a little housekeeping before we start. I have a flight to London in half an hour, so we're going to speak English. Mr. Kliger will speak in English, and after that, Sam will show his Russian-American side by taking over as moderator for me. He's going to bail me out while I go to the airport. So we're going to start in English, and then Mr. Kliger will take over as the next chairperson of a panel, and after that, Mr. Zissels will speak, okay? So, without any further ado, because we're running over the limit of the time, it's a panel about memory policy, which is an extraordinarily important topic in this moment, especially when Ukraine is in the midst of a national state building enterprise. When building a nation state, we also need to write a history or rediscover a history, or in some cases rewrite a history, right? The Ukrainians are now in the midst of a state building enterprise and a state building history, so it's very important that they look at forgotten histories, or histories that have not gotten quite enough attention, or have been overlooked, or have been, for particular, mostly ideological reasons, forgotten. So, I do want to say one thing, which I think is very important, in the context of what the JUC is doing, what the Jewish-Ukrainian Confederation is doing here. Mr. Loshkin's flagship project, a City of a Righteous project, or a Street of a Righteous project, they are renaming, this is their flagship project, they are renaming city streets all across Ukraine for writers. It is a project of World War II memory, of Holocaust memory. It's very important. I'm very glad that Boris Loshkin is doing this. It's an extremely important and useful thing that our friends in the JUC are doing. So, because we're short on time, I'm just going to skip the introductions, and we're going to go straight to Mr. Phil Carmel, who's going to, I think, do a little PowerPoint, yeah? And then after that to Mr. Singer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vlad. I'd like to make a short presentation here. I just want to give you a few very short figures to put these things into perspective. Before the war, there was something like 1,500 Jewish communities which had existed in this country for the last 400 years or so. Between the Elbe and the Dnipro, there were 8,000 Jewish communities. Most of those, of course, were wiped out in the Shoah. We as Jews do Holocaust memory extremely well on a macro basis. In other words, we understand that more than 1 million people were killed in Auschwitz, that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. But taking that onto a micro basis so that people in towns and villages understand the destruction of Jewish communities, the destruction of Jewish heritage in this country, and not just Jewish heritage, because Jewish heritage was an integral part of Ukrainian heritage, making sure that Ukrainians now take that on board and protect it together with us. So I'll make this presentation now. We set up this operation in 2015. And the question is begged why it took the Jewish world 70 years. And the reason is because it was perceived as a black hole. Nobody knew how much it would cost. Nobody knew it was possible. Nobody knew that we would get the cooperation of local authorities and national governments to do it. We work in these countries. Up till this date, we have fenced 85 cemeteries across Ukraine. I want to give you some examples of the problems that we face. Here in Lipetska Polyana in Zakarpattia Oblast, there is a Jewish cemetery on the right-hand side next to a Christian cemetery. Over the course of the last 40 years, individually, graves have been dug up from the Jewish cemetery and replaced with Christian graves. Jews have not been there for 50, 60, 70 years, and that's a situation which we've seen here in the Zakarpattia Oblast and in other places as well. Here in Nadvirna, in Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast, is an example of desecration, and these are other problems. But mostly, the problems that we see are neglect. The fact that Jews do not live in these places anymore has meant that these cemeteries are threatened. Here in Zbaraj, with the help of the local authority, we recently fenced. This is an example of a fenced Jewish cemetery in a town which had over 60% of its population before the war were Jewish. Sorry. We should go forward rather than back. This is a fence that we did in Kremnitz. But we can only protect a certain amount. There are probably 1,500 sites in this country. The question is, what do we do to ensure that places that we cannot yet protect are protected? And therefore, as a result of funding which we've received from the European Union, we have developed a system of monitoring in cooperation with local authorities and surveying with the details online. 1,500 sites will be surveyed this year in 5 project countries, including here in Ukraine, with over 1,000 sites done here. The material is put immediately online with photographs, and it is done through drone technology. Material is sent straight from the field into our central hub in Kyiv, and immediately 3D models are drawn up so that projects are ready to be taken place straight away. This is an example of a Jewish cemetery in Transcarpathia. But the key issue, the most important issue, is the cooperation of local authorities. I want to say here to members of the Ukrainian Parliament and to members and to people who are involved in local authorities here, after having fenced 85 sites in this country over the last four years, we have not encountered a single Ukrainian local authority that has not cooperated fully. And I want to thank, on behalf of our organization and on behalf of our funders and our board, all the Ukrainian people who've been involved in this project. Secondly, to take this project on, we must involve young people. I want to say what I usually say to people at a rededication ceremony, which usually involves a local school, that people should realize that in the lives of their grandparents, in these towns and villages across Ukraine, there was terrible carnage that went on. It went on against Jews, but it also went on against Ukrainians and Belarusians and Roma and many other people as well. We need those people, those young people, to understand and internalize what went on there. The cemetery is the last witness of a Jewish community which existed there. When people visit that cemetery, they know that a Jewish community existed there, and then they are forced to ask why the Jewish community is no longer there. And the reason for that is, of course, xenophobia and anti-Semitism and intolerance. I want to finish off here with an example of a cooperation which took place, a wonderful cooperation with a Ukrainian girl of 15 years old in the town of Derajne in Rivne Oblast. It's a short film. I hope the sound.
Це є гірка, дуже відома серед дітей, на якій завжди взимку багато веселощів і такого подібного. Але мене ще в дитинстві завжди бентежив той факт, що це все на кладовищі.
Dorajny this year. And Dorajny is a little bit complicated because it's in a forest as well. It's not owned by the village council, it's owned by the Forestry Commission. The fact that Katie said that I want you to do this in my village made sure that we prioritised on this site, and she is responsible more than anybody else. We cannot protect these cemeteries on our own. We are not here in these towns and villages, particularly the small villages like this. We depend on local people to be involved in the protection of the cemetery because it's their heritage, it's not just our heritage.
Село Дражне було заселене євреями не лише в ХХ столітті, а і до того в певний час це було взагалі абсолютно єврейське містечко. І ми намагаємось відшукати родичів євреїв, які тут жили. Поки що це безуспішно, але все ж ми на шляху до мети.
Indeed.
Okay, Mr. Singer, you have a. Okay.
Which language?
As you like, sir.
Okay, I'll start with English. Good afternoon again. Memory and memorization has to do with history. And history, as you know, is a very, very tricky thing. In 2011, here in Kyiv, there was a commemoration of 65th anniversary of Babi Yar. Many of you attended. I believe that was President Yushchenko at that time. But anyway, there was a big commemoration, big gathering, international gathering. When everything finished, I took a cab to go to my hotel. And the cab driver was a young man in his 20s. And he was a little nervous, and he said, why there are so many cars, so many government officials here, going here and there? And I said, well, you don't know, there is a commemoration of 65th anniversary of Babi Yar. And he said, what is Babi Yar? Okay, I told him, I go, you know, in September 29, 1941, 34,000 Jews were killed at this place by Germans. And he opened his blue eyes, looking at me and said, they were killed? For what? And that's the question that hurt me as well. For what? This naive young person simply does not know, and he was born in Kyiv. So let's not have too much expectation of commemorations and everything. People don't know. I bet right now that if we do a study in Kyiv, asking young people, and they're up to 30 maybe 35, if they know what is Babi Yar and what happened here, my guess, 80% will know nothing. And again, history is very tricky. Some semesters I'm teaching history in the American college, American History 1. And I asked them about the history of World War II. I take the blackboard, I put it in in two parts, who was on this part and who was on that part. And out of probably 20 students, only 2 can get it right. They are confused. Japan with America, with Italy, with Great Britain, France, Poland, Russia. People are confused. They don't know. People don't know history, and people are not interested in history. Does it mean that we should not commemorate? Of course not. Does it mean that we should not, build a museum in Babi Yar? Of course not. Absolutely yes. The cemeteries we have to preserve, and many other things we have to do. But again, we have to understand that the Holocaust remembrance needs everyday work and needs everyday education. The memorial, Babi Yar Memorial, will be functional if every day there will be school children who will come every day to the Babi Yar as a mandatory class. That's why maybe in 10 years, when I will take again the cab in Kyiv, a person will know what is Babi Yar, otherwise, no way. And because history is a very tricky thing, I think we have to take good care of historical memory. Some of my friends here in Ukraine, they said, and they are right, they said, don't let them choose their heroes. Every nation has a right to choose who will be its heroes. That's fine with me. Please go ahead and choose who will be your heroes. However, if you have such a right to choose your heroes, I have a right to have some doubt about, is your choice right or is your choice wrong? Based on the facts that we know, we have some concerns. Frankly speaking, we in America, the American Jewish Community, we have some concerns about heroization and glorification of those organizations and individuals who participated together with Nazi, collaborated with them in murdering hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian Jews. No matter what motive was there, fighting against Stalin, thinking that all the Jewish, babushka, dedushka, and so on are, Bolsheviks, that they created Holodomor and so on, no matter what motive is. The fact is, on this land, there were many thousands of Jewish people killed by local collaborators. And it should be said. That's number one. Number two, on the other hand, there were thousands of people, I believe more than 3,000 people, righteous among the nations. Those who, risking their lives, save Jewish kids, Jewish people, and that's an enormous heroic act. This is real heroism of an enormous magnitude. I cannot imagine how would I risk my life and the life of my family to save an Ukrainian kid. I don't know. But they did it. As a matter of fact, in my family was a story when a Ukrainian woman went and said, first kill me and then kill him. And that's why I think that Ukrainian people, Ukrainian civil society, first of all, Ukrainian NGOs, they have the obligation, they, not the Jewish community, the Ukrainian civil society has an obligation to build memorial for those Ukrainians who are real heroes, because this is a pride of Ukrainian people. This is a pride of Ukrainian nation. Definitely, Jewish community will help them. definitely we can work together to build such a monument. And that's why we suggested to Boris Loshkin to work together on, let's say, erecting a monument to the righteous among the nations, Ukrainian righteous among the nations. Here in Kyiv, in central place somewhere, to erecting one symbolic monument to all 3,000 people or more who saved. And the initiative, in my opinion, should come from Ukrainian civil society, with, of course, the support from the Jewish people, because we say only thank you. But this is the hero of Ukrainian nations. At this optimistic point, I will wrap up. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any question you may have.
I'm going to run to the airport. I just want to. I'm going to hand over the gavel to Sam 1 second. I want to say thank you, first of all, to everyone for being here. This is a tremendous thing. Just being here for 2 days, I have an immense impression of the fact that this country is going in the right direction, that Jewish memory and Jewish community are being built here, that this country is building something very special, and that we're in a kind of inaugural moment of this forum, which I think will go on for many years, and I hope we'll all come back and see each other. So, thank you again for coming. Thank you to Tomasz and Tatiana and to Boris Loshkin for inviting me. I'm going to hand this over to my friend Sam, and I hope not to miss my flight. So, gentlemen.
Thank you, Vlad, for moderating at least part of this panel. And now I would like to introduce a legendary figure, Josef Zissels, a good friend of mine, good friend of AGC, a person who did a lot for the Jewish community in Ukraine, for understanding and cooperation between American Jewry and Ukrainian Jewish community. His biography is fascinating. You can find it on the website. That's why I'm not going to prolong this introduction. Josef will be speaking in Russian language. So those of you who don't understand, please take your earpieces and listen to what Joseph is going to say. Josef Zissels.
Спасибо за такое представление.
Thank you for this presentation. Well, I was invited to present myself. I would like to talk about the different projects on memorialization. So, well, yesterday, after Zeninheim presentation, the person who just paid a lot of attention about different identity issues of the global Jewry. So, well, we just started to think about the Jewish Ukrainian identity, or Ukrainian and Jewish identity. And I must admit that we communicated with Dr. Hanin for a long period of time, and that's a kind of a result of our communication. So, well, how the Jewry was divided into different parts since 1990s, and how all the identities established, etc. So, well, and that was a kind of a message. So I can talk Ukrainian, I can speak Ukrainian and Russian, and I do understand that Ukrainian language is in the beginning for become the Ukrainian language as the language of communication. Yet it's on the way. But I also would like to say a few words about memorization. Memory movement, memorization. I remember I remember everything started in the end of 1980s, how there was the revival for Jewish community life, so how the renovation was done, and it was done through the first projects devoted to the process of memorization. There was the first memorial projects to memorize the memory on the people who were killed locally in the different areas in Ukraine, and I started to explain how Holocaust plays a very important role in the structure of identity of Jewish people, because the awful tragedy was in Ukraine, and then about 1.5 million were killed in Ukraine. So, according with the statistics, we just deal with the statistics, and VAAD Ukraine deals with the statistics. So, we have the mass graves of 2,000 mass graves all around Ukraine. What does it mean, mass graves? The place where more than 50,000 people were killed. So, we can say that it's approximate number, because we do not know the archive data precise, and we have to restore all the data, and we can get the German archives with the more detailed information, but unfortunately even them are not available to provide us with the information about the all mass graves in Ukraine. And talk about the identity, I want to say that the issue on Holocaust is the very important issue, even the leading issue. And talking about the other forms of identity we talked about previously, I think Holocaust is also within the structure of identity of the Israeli Jewish people. So, but they are not thinking about Holocaust as a leading thing, the leading point, because the Western European Jewish people, they're just still thinking about that. And more than 2,000 places, about half of that were from our side. We've done some research, and it was very fundamental to find the possibility to get the funds and support. Just only half of that places can have some specific memorial announcement about the Jewish people were killed there. So, it's we had lots of efforts just to rename even the announcements, because it was just the announcement about the Soviet people killed, and there was the Soviet citizens were killed. But for us, it was very important to replace the so-called Soviet people into Jewish people. It was very important for us, and all that mass graves still have the specific memorial tables about the Soviet people, but not Jewish people. So in the beginning of 1990s, we started to deal with the books of memory. So lots of Jewish communities have this already published books of memory. So, and based on these books of memory, we can restore the whole picture of what happened during the time of the Holocaust. And so we can restore the names of all that people who were killed that time. And the lots of influence we got from the so-called unity of that Jewish people who were from that areas. So we can say that a lot of people from Mohilov, Podilsky, Starozhenets, Chernovitz, and others, those who were born in that place, those who were from that place, because of the efforts, we could restore the Jewish cemetery, and we erected the monuments and to commemorate those victims of Holocaust. As of today, after 30 years, when we started this process of renovation of Jewish life, we can mention that we are developing the process of memorization, but we have a lot to be done, not for 1 decade, even for more than a decade. And So that's some graves and memories. That's what we could do, and some cemeteries are located so far, and it's very hard to reach that places. But we would like to thanks to many organizations, those who supported us, and some of that areas already um, got the monuments, some in process. But I would like to pay your attention about this very important things to memorize these spaces. We have to memorize, we have to erect the monuments, we have to put the right announcement, the right description on the memorials. So well, we do have different aspects: scientific, educational, and the so-called promotional. And as Mr. Sam Kliger told us before, not many people, they do not know about the Holocaust. And so
of the Holocaust since 1997 here. We've had a major project that has gone far beyond the organization. The project which is called What We Learned from Holocaust. It is done by the Center of Holocaust Research in Kyiv and the Center UMA in Dnipropetrovsk that is doing the job headed by Dr. Shipak. These centers have been doing a lot of job for 2 decades in teaching at Holocaust level in Ukraine, in high school and universities. The same lectures are done in libraries and other institutions. More than 1,000 history teachers and other humanitarians have been involved. Hundreds of seminars have been held, and many teachers have visited Yad Vashem seminars to come back here with new knowledge. They're given different handouts issued by these centers. No situation abroad. I can say that these Holocaust lessons take a large volume, and they only 4 hours are given to study the Holocaust in academic program in schools, but beyond that a lot is taught in a week where near Kyiv, high school students will get together. I'm speaking about Ukrainian high schools. They do their own projects to give their ideas of what they learn from Holocaust, and about 100 projects like this have been brought to another seminars. Seminars have been held since 2001, and the best projects are published as a book, the best projects of kids, the memory of Holocaust. We would praise this project. We can't say it is sufficient because it's the business of NGOs rather than the state that from one hand is not prevent, but on the other hand I would like them to be more active in helping this. It's also very important to say that today we've come to a point when a series of researchers have appeared, not only Jewish but also Ukrainian researchers who have been studying Holocaust in this country, and they pay attention to Holocaust various areas of Ukraine, because you might not, part of Ukraine was occupied by Romania. Quite a large part of the south of Ukraine was occupied by Romania, and other parts was occupied by German army and specific features of Holocaust are different in these different areas of Ukraine. And they, the researchers are studying this special feature. That's why memorializing projects done in various areas, we have to bear in mind these specific features and to underline that, because it's important to speak about Holocaust. We have also to underline these specific features. I could list a series of projects that are being done in Ukraine today. Now that this project are quite expensive, whereas the Jewish community is poor, then it is clear that local Ukrainian communities have lack of funds. Now that mass graves are scattered around towns or major cities, so without the help from Israel, Germany, and the United States, wouldn't have been able to do part of the job that has been done over the last 30 years. Like the Fox project, which is called Let's Protect Memory, that has been done in Ukraine for several years now. We are involved with this project too, but the main structure in Ukraine that is involved in this project, the Ukrainian Center of Holocaust Studies, headed by Anatoly Podolsky. Their partners of this project are Foreign Ministry of Germany and Memorial Fund of Jews Killed in Europe. And due to these organizations, these projects are being done. What they have done over the last 3 years in 3 areas of Ukraine, Lviv, Volyn, and Rovno, 5 large memorials have been opened. American Jewish community, and Baker, who is here, is aware of those projects, and they also accompanied, support this project process of implementation. So that's been done in 3 oblasts, 3 areas of Ukraine, and this year in the oblast of Zhytomyr, Vinnytsia, another 11 major memorials will open. These memorials have some advantages in comparison with the minor ones, because they are more informative. They have major research support, but they are quite expensive. Due to Foreign Ministry of Germany, we could have brought some funds for such memorials. Thus, one memorial cost was $2,000 on average, which is quite impossible for minor local communities. I discussed with the organizers of the project, so I said that it could be a good idea to make more sites like this that could be cheap. Of course, I didn't manage to convince, but let's count for yourself 16 memorials like this over the last 5 years, and still we have about 2,000 sites ahead of us, which means that we'll have to work for decades at the same level. And unless we are thankful to the German government for allocating funds for such projects and for taking care of Jewish cemeteries. Also, I could mention a project that has recently begun. It is done by the center headed by Maria Luisa Beck, a member of Bundestag. They have conducted a number of memorial projects, and on the 5th of September this year, such a project will take place in Chernovitz. Over the last decade, Ukraine has created a series of real museums. The first museum was set up in Odessa, a Jewish museum, and in such museum, part of exhibits are devoted to the Holocaust in pure form, like we can see in Europe or in the United States. The Museum of Holocaust does not exist so far. There are some designs and ideas in this direction. Now we could highlight the Dnipropetrovsk Museum of Jewish History, Ukrainian Jewish history. It's a large museum taking an area of about 2,000 square kilometers, which devotes a lot to Holocaust in Ukraine, and Museum Chernovtsi, which has a stand devoted to the beginning of Holocaust in Ukraine. Now this project has been expanded, and over the last years we have been doing a major project on creating the Museum of the Holocaust, which will tell not only about the golden age of Jews in Ukraine, but also about that. We've also renovated the building at the entrance of the Jewish cemetery. The cemetery has two sites of mass graves that will be part site of exhibition complex of this museum. This project will last for another 5 years. Now that the state does not help, everything depends on fundraising, and we are conducting this fundraising across the world to find funds for continuation of the project. We are now designing concepts. A group of experts headed by Dr. Boris Haimovich from Israel, who are writing concepts, and the framework concept has already been done. Also, architecture design is now been made for this museum, which will be defended at various councils. These historical buildings, writing, text, decorations, and we want to get back to its authentic look, to make it as a memorial of culture. The museum will take about 1,000 square meters, but we're still far away from implementing of this project. I want to move to a very important part, and namely the Babi Yar. Over those years, and I've already said about this, in 2 days, on 29th and 30th of September 1941, over 33,000 Jews were killed, the evidence of which are German archives, quite correct numbers, speaking about further destiny. There's no such precise information either in German archives or other places. That's why the general estimates of Jews killed in Babi Yar is different. Nowadays, researchers working at various institutions and museums agree that about 100,000 people are killed in Babi Yar, and 2/3 of them accounted for Jews, not only from Kyiv but also other places of Ukraine. During the last decades, since 1960s, there had been a series of projects that tried to be implemented. Unfortunately, they have not been implemented. Only history of them is remained, and this history should also be reflected on those projects that have not been implemented in Babi Yar. That time just not come. Now we have different situation. Now we have not one project but two projects. Situation has changed last February, when in addition to the projects that was announced in 2016 during the memorial events at Babi Yar, that time the project was presented, and behind this initiative were Michael Friedman, Pavel Khan, and Michael Fuchs from Russia. That was announced. President Poroshenko came to this presentation, and he said he wanted to be head of this project, and his family foundation is ready to support, to give financial support to this project. In one way or another, this project has been done. There is a historical narrative. I'm not going to go into details about this project because, unfortunately, Yana Barin was here yesterday. He is co-head of this project, but she had to leave, and she couldn't make it here. I'm going to tell you about another project that was announced last February in the Interfax agency. This Ukrainian project on memorializing of this side. This project includes huge territory, about 7 hectares, not only territory of historical Babi Yar, but also adjacent cemeteries, and also the site of the tragedy of 1961 in Kurenyovka, when man-made disaster took place and 1,500 Kyivites died. This project is of 2 parts. This is Memorial Park of 7 hectares. Then the actual museum of Babi Yar victims and Ukrainian Holocaust Museum. I could emphasize main features, these 2 projects and their differences. First of all, projects that I have mentioned, first presented by Yana Barinova, its narrative is universal. It covers the whole of Eastern Europe and beyond. The Ukrainian Museum of Holocaust and Second project done on request of Ukraine's government. It is done by a group of history scientists of Ukraine. This group is composed of 15 history science headed by Ukrainian Jewish history science. So this is one of difference. Another difference is that the second project approaches more delicately to the issues of Jewish history and traditions. Now that the first project is supposed to be done on the site of the former Jewish cemetery, and which is quite controversial, and this project of Rabbi Schlesinger from London organization that does control of Jewish cemeteries in Europe, and they say that it's not possible to build there because it still has remains of those Jews that were buried in the cemetery. And this project does not plan construction on those sites where there were shootings and graves. And in addition to Ukrainian Museum of Holocaust, I also include Museum of Victor Babi Yar, because, as I've said, it's not only Jews who were killed in Babi Yar, but also other groups of people, including POW, about 20,000 also sailors of the Dnieper fleet, also mental hospital patients, Ukraine nationalists in 1942, some priests as well. Today, the territory of Babi Yar, which is not looked after, has about 30 monuments which have no concept, not literally, no sensible concept, and they should remove those projects that are going to be done. Well, basically, let me say that it's time to come to an end. And my speech would like to end this, and hopefully in 5-7 years in Babi Yar, we will have both memorial museum, which lives to the expectations of not only Ukrainian Jews, but Jews of across the world. Thank you.
Have no time for questions. We have to wrap up. Again, I would like to thank you, the organizers, Boris Loshkin. He always comes by the end of the session, so thank you. Thank you, the organizers, and Leshana Haba Kyiv.
There may be no time for questions, but there's time, ample time for answers. And those answers will be provided by you, and you, and you, and by everyone who feels that they have to provide answers with their work, with their lives, with remembering those who are dead, and with providing more life for those who are being born. Boris Loshkin does not come at the end of the session. He's always here as some other organizers or people who are taking part or have taken part in the work of the Ukrainian Jewish Confederation. And I am honored to offer the floor for the closing remarks to the honorary president of the Ukrainian Jewish Confederation, Boris Fuchsman. Please.
Добрый день, дорогие.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, dear guests. We're very glad that we hold this event on a very high level with a very active participation. So we had a lot of disputes, panels were very successful, and we do hope that for future, this event would be annually, and we will be improving this event. So we do have some improvement, and we will expand this also. And I do hope to see you next year. I do hope to see you next year for our second Jewish Confederation of Ukraine Forum of Ukraine. And we do hope that you felt quite comfortable this few days here, and that accommodation was okay, and the service was okay, and we will be very happy to get the feedbacks from you. We would be happy to get via email, or maybe it would be great to have that kind of articles in the mass media. So we also would invite you to become the active participants for the process of preparation of our second forum. So and all the ideas would be accepted gladly for improvement of our work. So thank you so much, and see you next year.